A cold night in Chicago changed two lives forever. When a homeless woman asked a kind stranger for his leftovers, she never imagined what would happen next. Watch till the end for this heart-touching story. Like, subscribe and share, and tell us, where are you watching from? It was a cold evening in downtown Chicago, the kind where the wind slices through even the thickest coat. Marcus Carter, a 32-year-old software engineer, had just wrapped up another exhausting day at work. He stopped by a small corner diner, the kind that smelled of coffee and fried onions, to grab a quiet dinner before heading home. The city buzzed around him, people rushing to trains, taxis honking, neon lights reflecting off wet sidewalks. After finishing his meal, Marcus asked the waitress to pack the rest of his sandwich and fries to go. He wasn't particularly hungry anymore, but he hated wasting food. As he stepped outside, adjusting his scarf, he noticed a woman sitting near the entrance, almost blending into the shadows. Her coat was too thin for the weather, her hands wrapped around a paper cup that was long empty. She looked up as he passed by, her voice barely a whisper. "Sir, could I please have your leftovers?" Marcus stopped mid-step. Most people around her walked faster when they saw her, pretending not to hear, pretending she didn't exist. For a moment, he almost did the same. He'd grown used to the city's unspoken rule: keep walking, don't get involved. But something about her eyes stopped him. Tired, yes, but filled with a kind of quiet strength. She didn't beg or plead. She just asked. He turned to her and said softly, "Are you hungry?" She hesitated, as if afraid he might mock her. "Yes. I haven't eaten since yesterday," she murmured. Marcus looked at the takeout box in his hand, then back at her. Without a word, he knelt down and offered it to her. But before she could take it, he asked, "Would you join me inside? It's warm there." Her eyes widened in disbelief. For a second, she thought she'd misheard him. People didn't invite her in. They barely looked at her. When he smiled reassuringly, she nodded slowly, and together they stepped back into the diner. The warmth hit her face, and for the first time in months, she felt like a human being again. The waitress at the diner glanced up as Marcus walked back in with the homeless woman. A flicker of hesitation crossed her face. She'd seen countless people like Evelyn before. Most turned away before they could even sit down. But Marcus smiled warmly and said, "Table for two, please." His tone left no room for judgment. Reluctantly, the waitress nodded and led them to a booth near the window. Evelyn moved slowly, clutching her torn coat as though it might vanish if she let go. She sat on the edge of the seat, her posture uncertain, her eyes darting around the room. The smell of hot food made her stomach twist in both hunger and shame. Marcus handed her a menu. "Order whatever you like," he said gently. She looked at him, as if he'd spoken in another language. "Anything?" she whispered. He nodded. "Anything." After a moment, she pointed to the simplest thing she could find: tomato soup and a grilled cheese sandwich. Marcus ordered the same, along with 2 coffees. When the food arrived, Evelyn hesitated again, her hands trembling around the spoon. "You don't have to watch me eat," she murmured, embarrassed. Marcus smiled faintly. "I'm not watching. I'm keeping you company." That broke the ice a little. Between small bites, she began to talk, slowly at first, then more freely. She told him her name was Evelyn Price, once a nurse in Detroit. Life had fallen apart after her husband's sudden death and a series of medical bills she couldn't pay. She lost her apartment, then her job, and finally, her hope. Marcus listened silently, not interrupting. He wasn't sure what struck him harder: her calm acceptance of her pain, or how invisible she'd become to the world. Outside, the Chicago lights flickered on the glass, reflecting 2 strangers sharing a quiet moment of humanity. And for Evelyn, that meal wasn't just food, it was dignity, something she hadn't tasted in years. That night, after Marcus dropped Evelyn off near the shelter she sometimes stayed at, he couldn't stop thinking about her. Her story kept replaying in his mind, the way she spoke softly without bitterness, even when describing everything she had lost. He lay awake in his apartment, staring at the ceiling, wondering how many others like her were out there, just invisible to everyone. The next morning, as he drove to work, the usual skyline of Chicago looked different. The busy streets, the expensive cars, the endless rush, it all seemed meaningless compared to what he'd witnessed the night before. During his lunch break, Marcus called his friend Dana, a coordinator at a local non-profit called Second Chance Foundation, an organization that helped people get back on their feet. "Dana, I met someone last night," he said, explaining Evelyn's situation. Dana paused for a moment. "Bring her in. If she's willing, we'll do everything we can." Marcus felt a spark of hope. That evening, he returned to the same diner, praying he'd find Evelyn again. And there she was, sitting on the same bench, clutching an old blanket. When he told her about the foundation, her eyes filled with confusion and disbelief. "You're serious?" she asked. Marcus nodded. "They can help you. Food, housing, maybe even a job. You just have to let them." Evelyn stared at him for a long moment, tears brimming in her tired eyes. "Why would you do all this for a stranger?" she whispered. Marcus looked down for a moment before answering softly, "Because someone once did the same for my mother, and it changed everything." The next morning, Marcus drove her to the foundation himself. As they walked in, Evelyn's hands shook, but for the first time in years, her steps were steady, as if hope long forgotten had returned to her heart. 6 months later, the city of Chicago was bathed in the soft light of spring. The streets were alive again, flowers blooming along the sidewalks, laughter spilling from coffee shops, and a warmth in the air that made everything feel possible. At a small community center on State Street, Evelyn stood behind a folding table, serving soup to a line of people who reminded her so much of who she once was. Her hair was neatly tied back, her clothes clean and pressed, and her smile, gentle but strong, carried the quiet pride of someone who had rebuilt herself from nothing. Thanks to the Second Chance Foundation, she now had a small apartment, a part-time job assisting at the local clinic, and a renewed sense of belonging. Marcus visited often, sometimes just to drop off supplies, other times to sit with her and talk like old friends. The local news station had caught wind of her story, the homeless woman who'd been lifted off the streets by the kindness of a stranger. They called it a miracle on State Street. During an interview, the reporter asked Evelyn what had changed her life the most. She smiled, eyes glistening. "It wasn't the food or even the shelter," she said softly. "It was being treated like a person again. He didn't look at me with pity. He looked at me with respect." That evening, Marcus watched the interview from his office, a quiet smile spreading across his face. He hadn't done it for recognition. He'd done it because it felt right. Outside his window, the city lights shimmered, reflecting off the glass like stars. Somewhere across town, Evelyn was helping others find their second chance, just like he had given her. And in that simple, powerful cycle of kindness, both their lives had been rewritten forever.